Hey class. Okay, so we're here. We're at the end. This is the last few lessons of the class, and these really focus mostly on media literacy and internet literacies more than anything else. So we're going to start the end of this class by focusing on some of the brighter parts of the web. I mean, we've spent the last several weeks really going on pretty much a deep dive of what can go wrong. And obviously with the web, almost anything can go wrong. On the other hand, it does offer a possibility of new ways of communicating that have never been experimented with before. I'm sure we had, and in fact I know this, there was much criticism about how television would act and radicalize and change people and make people do different movements after the advent of television about 70, 80 years ago when people started getting that mostly in their homes. Now with the internet, we're still in its earliest stages, just over 30 years old. It's not really a new medium that's figured out where it is, and social media being just over 15 isn't exactly mature enough to tell us what's going on. What we do know is it's not going away. And by not going away, we can start investigating some of the more intricacies of how to operate within that structure, work with things, and become part of the industry, I guess, so to speak. Because many of you are going to graduate, and if you're studying media studies, you're going to interact with social media at some point or another. And for those of you who are interested in making a career of social media, there's a lot. There's a real lot. Like I said, I made an entire degree based on new media, and every single one of them are employed. They're doing everything from social media coordination to making, being a photographer, to being a strategist. There's all different things. To editors, there's people that do just video editing. And that's because the aesthetics of social media are really important to understand in terms of how we attract audiences or connect with audiences. And you are the audience, but you're also the producer, as we've gone over many times. So today we're going to talk about social media strategies and how social media is part of a strategy that agencies take on, advertisers take on, that marketers take on, that this is all part of a comprehensive approach to using these tools to connect with the audience in many different ways than traditional media ever could. As we talked about with McLuhan many times, the difference between cool and hot mediums. Television being a cool medium, you just consume it, it just kind of flows through you. But now that we're in a second screen or third screen environment, meaning that whenever you're watching television, you're likely also on several other screens, it means that you're interacting back. So you're mixing hot and cool mediums at the exact same time. So people who work in the industry of supporting these products, ads, markets and everything, products, because we're consumers, we start understanding that there's a way to interact with all this. So there's some notable standouts, I think, that I want to focus on in this, but I also want to have you kind of investigate for homework as well. Some of the standouts, and these are like the 3 standouts that you really can't investigate for homework because I'm going to go over them. But some of the standouts are Wendy's, Steakum, and Duolingo. These are 3 brands that have really understood what it means to use native advertising or to understand social media as a platform of communication, but also one of consumer marketing. And I think that's really important. So I think the first question that most advertisers and marketers ask is, who is the audience and what are we trying to get from them? And one of the biggest things that people are trying to do is obviously sell things and figure out how to create a return on investment. Advertising costs money, markets cost money. So when you have a product and you need your audience to buy that product, you've got to reach them and make them want it. In my advertising aesthetics class, I always talk about one of the core tenets of advertising, which somehow creepily aligns with how the internet operates as well, which is advertising works in a broad scale of FOMO, in not FOMO of missing out, but fear of missing the thing. You see, advertising tries to create a place or a lifestyle or an idea of something that you need, even though you hadn't originally needed it. But people want it because it creates a gap in that. The images that you see in advertising or the things you hear present to you a reality in which you could have. And the only way you can achieve that is by reaching it through purchasing that thing. The problem with advertising is that we have the problem of actually the success of that. Let's say you succeed, you sell that product. How do you get somebody to buy another thing? How do you get people to want more? Well, there's something called the Hedonistic Treadmill. Back in the 1960s, Bell and Campbell wrote an article about the hedonistic treadmill, which is about what happens when we normalize anything. This is why when you want something really, really bad, you get it, and then within a few weeks, you normalize it. It just becomes part of who you are, and then you want more. This is just standard human behavior. And what that means is whenever we get something, it speeds up, and then we come back to its normal pace. That's how we always go through our life. And so this treadmill is basically what we're on at all times. We're always reaching towards something, running maybe faster, but if you think about it, you're standing in place. You're not really going somewhere. Many companies use the Hedonistic Treadmill as their main marketing plan in order to keep you buying new products that you may already have, but you need an upgrade for. And this goes into many different places. But when we start thinking about how people are going to reach the audiences, there's really three main, I guess there's four main directions that I want to go over in this class. One is, I'm going to go in historical order. So the first one is viral media. Originally, when viral videos were a thing, viral media was a quick way of getting people to connect with the product. They were showing quirky new ways of advertising and quirky new ways of approaching an audience. And so in my advertising class, I actually show Cadbury had a really fantastic viral campaign in the early 2010s, but the one you likely know more than any other is the Old Spice guy. Old Spice, an old brand, was known for being the brand for older men. It was selling old smelling musky perfumes and colognes to older men. And they wanted to start competing in the new market because at the time, Axe body spray was the big thing. They wanted to start competing against body sprays and younger men's tools. But how do you switch an old brand to reach a new audience? Well, you create viral media. And so the Old Spice guy became the viral media of the time. They created a cookie cutter, fortune cookie style ad where he used there's 2 tickets to that thing you like. He was always using that fortune cookie approach. And it was also weird and avant-garde. He started in a shower, ends up on a horse, but going through a wild amount of different adventures. So it's something that was meant to not just be a television commercial, but ends up online and shareable. 2, influencer marketing. Many different companies connect with influencers to push their product out. And this has been going on for about 13 or 14 years now. Influencers, as you know, the term influencer is fairly new. I mean, that's less than 10 years old. That comes from Instagram, that term. But vloggers and creators and partners and producers, all those terms are out beforehand. And what they've tried to do was encourage influencers to be product endorsers. That's just a way to think of an influencer. They are a product endorser. So a product sees that there's a long tail audience, which we've talked about. You see an influencer who has an audience that's stuck around with them for a really, really long time. That means that audience has developed a peer-based influence system that now the influencer can suggest a product and likely the audience will start to adopt it because they're interested in what the influencer does. This is also because of parasocial relationships, which we've talked about, which is when you believe you are familiar with the person on the other side of the screen, mostly because they're making direct address eye contact and speaking to you in a way that's more familiar, not being disconnected. They're very interested in how you understand the world rather than talking to somebody who's across the entire general spectrum of television. And so when an influencer signs up as part of an influencer marketing, is they start doing content that's like SponCon or advertorial, which is material that is embedded. So for example, there's 2 different kinds of this. One is the style that like Tyler Oakley might do, which is he ends his vlogs with a plug. Not any longer, he's on break. But a lot of influencers end and they go, this is, they do a little commercial, like his is Audible or Warby Parker. But at his peak, Tyler Oakley was sponsored. I mean, we saw Generation Light, but he was sponsored by Svedka, Target, Disney, Bud Light Lime, Warby Parker, Audible, trying to think of the many others, so many products at the same time. And I know the person who sold the Audible one, he was being paid approximately $250,000 per quarter. So $1 million a year from Audible to basically make commercials for them. So it means Audible trusted Tyler Oakley to make those types of subscriptions happen. That's a lot of trust in a person who, as we've talked about, could be you, could be anybody. So that's part of that. The other thing is SponCon. Many months ago, we watched Casey Neistat's Do What You Can't commercial. That is a Samsung commercial that hired Casey Neistat to promote their phones. Basically, it's a phone commercial that Casey Neistat did by marketing it in the form of a call to action for more YouTubers to join the field. But that is very much a SponCon. That is sponsored content. 3, social media managers. So this is a job that you can get. Social media managers are people who operate social channels, whether they be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok, or whatever. There's a person behind every account that you see online. This is why I wanted to bring up Wendy's, Duolingo, and Steakum. All three have completely different routes on social media. There's also a conspiracy that some of these people all communicate with a back channel. They're all part of a way of communicating, so they all know how to market using the social channels. But because social media moves so quickly, you have to be very careful who you hire to be a social media manager. You can't really screw this up. If you are a social media manager, you also have to know the difference between toggling between your personal account and your work account. You don't want to accidentally be posting on main when you're posting from your own personal account into some brand. Like imagine a multi-billion-dollar brand and you accidentally post something really personal. You got to be really careful about what account you're using. But on top of that, you have to be fluent. And this is what we talked about a while back about that social media marketing plan we did way back, which is about understanding content fluency on each platform. That platform fluency, the ability to speak to different audiences in different spaces, is really the most important part of a social media manager's job. You can't just say things that are aimed towards Facebook on Twitter. They won't work. You can't make a TikTok video for Facebook. Well, maybe you can. Sometimes those are weird. But you can't really make things that are cross-platform. You have to understand how to speak that language. So Wendy's is very known as being a snarky account online. Wendy's always tries to clap back or tries to respond to people who speak to it, and often tries to be part of the zeitgeist itself. So when Facebook changed its name to Meta, Wendy's response was, "We're going to change our name to Meat," which I thought was funny, to which Burger King replied, "We're going to change our name to Wendy's." So it was like this a funny little banter that was going on. It could have been not funny depending on how you look at it, because A, corporations aren't your friend. So what they're trying to do is figure out how to make you feel more friendly with a corporation or a brand. That's what a social media manager's job is, which is kind of interesting. Steakum, on the other hand, has a completely different route for what they do on social media. Steakum, for some reason that's fairly unexplained, has decided to start posting media literacy advice on their Twitter account, teaching us how to better read the media. It's a fairly meta account because they're well aware they are a brand, and especially a brand of frozen meat sheets, which is just a weird sentence to say, that helps people understand how to read advertising, how to better read the media. And so that's a kind of a nice, what we call CSR, corporate social responsibility. And so somebody in the back rooms of Steakum decided to incorporate CSR into their product. And that corporate social responsibility becomes a way of acknowledging themselves inside the space. Many companies have big CSR divisions. Nike, Timberland, those are companies that have it. Tom's Shoes, they have huge corporate social responsibility parts of their product that try to tell people that they're making good decisions, not just to purchase something, but that that company is responsible for its awareness of where it sits within the world and how it gives back. That's CSR. So that's very interesting in terms of the meta CSR that Steakum is doing, because it doesn't really offer you any additional product back except acknowledging that you should be able to read media better. You should be a better person who consumes media, and especially in digital space. The other one is Duolingo. Duolingo is doing an amazing job on TikTok. There will be a link in the Substack about an article about Duolingo's social media management, because they are so native. Duolingo has an awareness of what its brand kind of does, because it uses push alerts to remind people to practice. People often take that as a threat. So Duolingo has taken up the idea that they're threatening, that this big owl is going to threaten you, and started making it part of their comedy shtick as part of their brand itself, which I think is really important. And that brings us to our last bit, which is native content. Native content, like what Duolingo does, means that it's made specifically for TikTok or made specifically for the product it's doing the work on. So native content is material that doesn't really need to advertise. It can actually stand alone on the social platforms. Mostly these are video based. So native content is things that seem like they can be shared outside of the brand. You don't have to make a purchase. It's mostly brand awareness or brand engagement. And so that goes more into what the idea of what we call the word impressions, which is the amount of eyeballs that you get to put on your ad. Impressions are really important to advertisers because it's brand awareness. It's the same way that Band-Aid became Band-Aid instead of adhesive bandages. Only Johnson & Johnson makes Band-Aid. No one else does. It's the way that Xerox, which we hear that term, is only made by Xerox, but it means photocopy. So somehow the brand itself has done such a good job that it overwrites all others because its brand awareness is so high. But again, all this comes down to my desire to help you become better consumers because this is the system in which we live. And so media literacy is understanding how these systems operate. So for homework, you actually have to do this. You're going to do, if you know other people in the class, you may do this in groups, no more than 3 per group. But if you want to do this in groups, that's fine. But most of you will do this solo, which is totally fine. You're going to identify a company, pick whichever you choose, whichever you'd like. And I want you to analyze, what their social media strategy is. I want you to do a broad survey of how they're using their platform. You're basically going to do a reverse engineer of a social strategy. You're going to tell me that you found this company and you like what it does. Historically, it started jumping on the social media game around, let's give a hypothetical, in 2011. And in 2011, it started using Twitter. Later, it started using Instagram, and this is what it's done. I find this fairly successful. So you're going to create a social deck. You can make a video for this one. You could use Zoom to record yourself. You could use your cell phone camera to do it. This could be a PowerPoint that is just played. You have your voice. It could be a deck that stands alone. If you make a deck, you have to use the notes at the bottom of the deck to write in what you would say if you were presenting it. So it's called a traveling deck. So that means somebody can retrieve the deck and read what you would have said to me out loud if you were to present it. But I prefer this to be as presentable as possible. So you're going to do a social media presentation. If we were in physical space, you would present this in front of your classmates. Being that we're in the digital world, we're not going to do that. But this is a 2-part assignment. 1, you're going to submit it to me, and 2, you're going to submit it into the discussion board in a smaller form factor, something that's a little more condensed and compact so your classmates can actually learn from you. This is, again, where you're going to be helping other people understand. So it's 2 versions, same thing, one's big, one's small. And it's basically you're going to post a summary. It could be like 1 slide, it could be a shorter video, it could be your choice in the discussion board, whereas you're going to send the big piece into the assignment. Same thing. 1 big, 1 small, same assignment. This is due after Thanksgiving, okay? Because we have a class off next week. It is Thanksgiving week next week. I want to give you the time to spend with your family, to get a little breather. So this gives you a little bit more time to do this assignment since it's fairly large. And then, like I said, the only other piece of homework too is an assignment that you have to submit your idea of what you're going to cover for You Are New Media, the last assignment. What is the most impactful thing that you came across this semester, and what are you going to cover so you could basically teach someone who's never taken this class, someone who's pretty far into social media. Like I said, think of a family member who's not really online, how you're going to explain a piece of the class. All you have to do is just submit a very quick sentence saying, I think this is the most important thing, I'm going to cover that. And that's pretty much the assignments for this week. So it is a pretty big project for this one, and that's why it takes about 2 weeks. But it covers both the assignment and the discussion, and most people have found this pretty fun because you basically do a pretty good deep dive into some company's strategy. And you learn a lot about how they use messaging and social media to communicate with their audience. And to me, that's pretty fun because that'll give you some good help if you end up in these industries or you just decide to buy the products. So as usual, this is part of that, is to always stay curious and stay healthy.